Everyone, when you think about it, has a story. Yet some stories seem more riveting than others. That's to be expected. The point is to use your story to give others hope, to help others get through a tipping point moment. An instance when either that person chooses to continue to be a victim or when that person finds the strength to transcend and move beyond their particular situation. So join us as we go into the world of the Explorers Club. Life's tough. The Explorers are tougher.
My name is Fabien Cousteau, and we're here in beautiful Lisbon. Join us as we explore with the world's greatest explorers.
For me, my toughness is my background. What happens when you start at the bottom? You know, my background coming from foster care. One of the things that I had on my list in life was to meet an astronaut, was to meet somebody that had gone to the moon, had gone to the stars, somebody that dreamed big, someone that started down here and could rise above. Can you come to Lisbon? Can you meet people around the world that inspire you? Richard Weiss gave me an invitation. He said, would you come out and tell the stories of the explorers?
You know, the Explorers Club is about the impossible. You know, I have spoken to people who've walked in space, walked on the moon. You know, it's sort of like Harry Potter. There's Hogwarts, where they have magicians, but this is where people look at a situation and say, I have a solution. And so, you know, the mission today becomes even stronger. We talk about global climate change, extinctions, all of these things. We all know the problems. And so if I just listened to all the problems, there'd be no reason ever to get out of bed in the morning. So I know people who look at all of these and say, hey, I think I have a solution, or I have a direction I think we should be heading towards.
It's, you know, I've always been curious. I took my first diving certificate when I was 10 years old. And the reason was I want to go diving with sharks because sharks have always been, you know, fascinating me. I've been diving all my life, but not until in the beginning of 2000. I had this encounter with the manta ray in Thailand for the first time. And
what is a manta ray?
The manta ray is the biggest ray swimming in the ocean. They can be 2,000 kilos. They have the biggest brain of all fish. They're very gentle, intelligent, curious, and just kind. They have a kind soul. And these manta rays just occurred like an angel from the deep.
What made you decide you wanted this career path?
Well, it started slowly, actually. When I was a kid, I was always interested in science and nature. Jacques Cousteau was my big hero. I always wanted to be like a marine biologist or something like that. And then as I got older, I got into music and then recording engineering. I was working in recording studios for years. But then I really got back into it again. And I got interested in photography and weather in particular. So I started photographing the weather. Lightning storms, things like that. And then I chased my first tornado.
There's a great man named Ian Player, and Ian actually saved the white rhino from extinction. And I met him when I was 18 years old, 19 years old. And when I met him, he said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I'm going to go save the cheetah. He said, well, let me tell you what I've done in my life. He saved the white rhino. And I think I followed in his footsteps.
A good friend of mine is this Dr. Kenneth Lacavera, and he's discovered the Dreadnoughtus, which is the largest known dinosaur ever to have walked the earth. He's a professor of Rowan University.
Well, like a lot of the people in my field, I knew when I was about 7 that I wanted to be a paleontologist. Yeah. Wow. A woman brought in a box of rocks and minerals into my Cub Scout meeting. And I grew up on the coast of New Jersey where there's sand and mud, basically.
So there's not much going on there.
And I had never seen things like this. I didn't know these things were in the world. And the next day I wrote an essay in second grade that I wanted to be a paleontologist, and I must have had the little golden guide to geology, and I described igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary rocks, and I wrote that sedimentary rocks...
In fact, you can memorize that. It's quite spectacular.
And I wrote that sedimentary rocks are the best kinds of rocks because you can find fossils in them.
So I think it's all about dreams, and that's very important to have people who are role models for other individuals. I grew up in the 1960s, and in May of 1961, I watched Alan Shepard lift off to go into space. I was 7 years old at the time, and dreaming of becoming an astronaut. And of course, I told people my dream. I was told it was impossible, because the only countries flying in space in those days were the United States and Russia. They were the only ones that had astronauts and cosmonauts. So for a Canadian kid growing up in Montreal, 7 years old, it seemed like a pretty tough dream to achieve.
It seemed impossible.
It seemed
but
impossible.
it wasn't impossible.
No, I was very lucky. It's funny how life works out. You know, I started scuba diving when I was 12 years of age, which was pretty unusual in 1967. And we used the US Navy Diver's Manual as a text for the course and things. And I thought, well, if I can't be an astronaut and explore outer space, I want to be an aquanaut and explore inner space, the undersea world. Ironically, I actually flew in space as an astronaut before I became an aquanaut and lived underwater.
I see more youngsters taking to wildlife as a profession now than about 25, 30 years ago when I was growing up. So wildlife has dwindled, forest areas are severely threatened, but the interest in nature is now far more than back then. My parents used to worry as to what's going to happen. So when I was catching snakes, going into the forest, doing all those crazy things, they thought, this guy, nobody in the family had ever done it. So my mother especially was very scared. She felt, oh, what is going to happen with our son? Eventually I went and studied in a chemical engineering college. They said, oh, all is well, this was just a minor hiccup. He's now had his senses back. And after my PhD, the day I finished my PhD, I took up a job where my first salary was less than the stipend that I got as a student in PhD. So I could have gone a chauffeur-driven car day one after my PhD in fluid mechanics. There I was working for a salary which was less than my stipend. So then they say we give up. So this guy is going to go and do what he wants to do.
Space follows the passion of the physics that explains everything. And so all of us that explore space think of it in different ways. For me personally, it's the forever frontier. It's everywhere and it's nowhere. It's not a final frontier. It's where we're going, where we've been, and where we don't know we've been. And so in this day, 2019, we're exploring space in new ways that 50 years ago when we landed on the moon, those brave dudes, those explorers would never have imagined.
A few minutes ago, I ran into Dr. Alan Stern, one of the most fascinating guys on Earth. Beyond sending the New Horizon spacecraft out of our solar system, he has a whole life story of dropping out of college and doing other people's term papers, deciding that he wanted to go back to college. Now he's become one of the leading figures in space exploration.
Well, there's a big wide universe out there, and we're actually exploring it with humans and robots across our solar system. And I've had the privilege of being involved in that now my whole career. And I don't think there's any greater contribution I could make than that. So it's been wonderful.
And how far out are we going?
Very far, in fact. The farthest spacecraft are now much more than 100 times farther away from the sun than the Earth is. It's a long way compared to any scale that we're used to on the Earth, but it's a very tiny way compared to the distance to the nearest stars.
So one of the greatest pleasures I have as president is standing in front of our membership at our annual dinner. We hold it every March in New York City, and ask questions like this. And you can raise your hand on any of these, Dustin. Who here has been to the North Pole? 250 people raised their hand.
Incredible.
Who's been to the South Pole? 200. Who's been to the top of Everest? About, I don't know, 25, 26, 27 people raised their hand, including a Sherpa woman who had climbed it 9 times more than any other person on Earth. I actually found her working at a Whole Foods store in Hartford, Connecticut, and brought her into the Explorers Club. Who's been to the Marianas Trench? And less than half the people that have walked on the moon have been down there, I think 4. And then I said, let's take this a little further. Who's been to outer space? And I had, I don't know, 30, 40 people raise their hands, and including Kathy Sullivan, the first American woman to walk in space. Then I said, let's take it out to the moon. Who here's been to the moon? And I had 6 people raise their hand. And then I brought up the last, who's sent a spacecraft out of our solar system? And of course, Alan Stern raised his hand.
And Alan raised his hand. Huh?
Yeah, so, you know, I don't care what kind of billionaire you are or head of state. You know, this is a group that you want to hang with if you have any interest in that area. And I think that the DNA of an explorer is curiosity. And these are people who look at a map and they go, wow.
The more I learn, the smaller I become. That's how it feels. And you know, my job is actually to highlight the experts. My job is, as a photographer and photojournalist, is to be truthful to what I see, and to also share stories with a bigger audience. And I learned that there are so many people around the world working, most in poor countries, but they go out there, they risk their own life every day to try to save and protect something that they believe in.
Volcanoes, storms, any extreme force of nature, I'm usually there with the camera rolling. Expanded to any extreme force of nature, from forest fires to avalanches, hail, lightning, volcanoes, you name it, all of it, I'm there.
So your top 5 most powerful adventures, the one to rule them all, what would be the 5 that you'd have to like take it all down and say, Dustin, this is it. These are the 5 wow moments.
Out of dozens, possibly hundreds of expeditions. Hurricane Katrina. I was in the middle of Hurricane Katrina and it was like being in a blender for 8 hours. That was intense and powerful. I witnessed the world's largest tornado ever documented. That was in Oklahoma. It was 2.6 miles wide.
2.6 miles
Yeah,
wide.
massive thing. I did an expedition in Turkmenistan, which is this desert nation in Central Asia, just north of Iran. And there's a fire pit. It's burning methane gas, about 100 feet deep and 250 feet across. And it's been burning for over about 50 years now. They were drilling for natural gas, it collapsed into a sinkhole. They lit it on fire thinking it would burn off. That was in 1971. Still burning today. So my goal was to go there, stretch fire-resistant ropes across the center of the crater, go out to the middle on pulleys with self-contained air, heat protective suit, Kevlar custom-made harness, because a regular harness would just melt from the
It's like
intense
something
heat.
you see in a movie. This is something you
Totally.
did.
Again, no one's ever done this before. World's first. This is a project I did for National Geographic. And then I went out to the middle, rappelled down, set foot at the bottom, and was gathering soil samples to get a DNA analysis to see if there's any kind of bacterial life living inside this coliseum of fire. And as I was digging, fire would come out of the hole that I was digging. It was crazy.
My aha moment was when I first saw a cheetah and I looked at it in the eyes at this wildlife park. And I swear that this animal probably just brought me into its life and said, you're going to work for me for the rest of your life, which is what I have done.
This is almost 19 years later. I head an organization called the Wildlife Conservation Trust. We are 112 people.
That's a big organization.
That is 108 humans and 4 dogs. So they are an important part of our team. They go and search for snares. So if there are poachers setting snares to catch wildlife, these dogs are trained to smell. So these dogs are South African. We bought it from South Africa, and it is a big nightmare to get any working dog into the country because of all the quarantine issues. But there was a big issue with a tiger at that point, and the tiger had killed about 16 people. And you have so many tigers. They are all within touching distance of people. So if they killed people, you will lose 2,020 human beings every 3 days. Okay? But if you look at the number of deaths because of tigers, even when they live right in the backyards of people, it is less than 100 people in 2 years.
I just came home from an assignment in Sumatra where I've been working with a palm oil industry, disaster and habitat loss for species like orangutans. That's why I was there 3 years ago to try to find out if there's something even called sustainable palm oil, and I came home with that material. This time I came home with, I met a female orangutan named Hope, and she should be in her best year, and she took her baby out in the palm oil plantation because of habitat loss. And someone shot her 74 times. The baby died, and she was blinded for life. And when I hear stories like that, that human really, we should be the smart ones.
Where's the empathy?
Yeah, no empathy, no respect. We should be the one taking care and nourish and nurse life and nature. We should be the smart ones, but over and over we meet people that's maybe not, and that makes me really sad, and that's why I try to change people's attitude.
Chasing tornadoes and then going after hurricanes and wildfires, and it just seemed to be the natural next progression would be go after volcanoes. And I've been to, I don't know, 20 or 30 active volcanoes around the world, and inside many of them as well.
You're kind of the guy that's known for volcanoes.
Among one of the other things,
Among many other things.
One of the many things,
How many close calls have you had?
I've had lava fly overhead, hundreds of yards through the air, where I've had to watch the trajectory of the lava flying. Your first instinct is to want to run. But you have to stand your ground, watch where the lava is going, and then move and dodge out of the way. If you turn and run, you can't see the piece that's going to hit you. So that was pretty intense. I was at a volcano in Cape Verde off the west coast of Africa, and there was a lava flow that was overtaking this village, literally steamrolling and crushing this village with this slow moving blocks of lava. And I was inside a building doing a piece to camera, as a matter of fact. I was hosting a television show at the time. And there was an aluminum door beside me, and you could hear the pieces of hot lava hitting the aluminum door. And as I'm talking to camera, bang, the door smashed open and all this hot lava rock started tumbling into the room with me. I ran out, camera still rolling. Less than a minute later, the entire wall collapsed in. So I've had a few close calls.
We don't usually say we're scared, we say it gets your attention, but in reality, it's a pretty scary
What is that
process.
like? So you open up, I'm gonna call it a hatch, and I apologize if that's not the word, and you tie on, and now you come out, you make one's mistake. That's it.
Well, you know, spacewalking is very much like rock climbing. You tether to whatever it is you're working on before you actually break your tether. So you make your tether before you break it. And if you have a problem spacewalking, we kind of jokingly say you may have the rest of your life to solve the problem.
And did you always know this is what you were going to do, or did you have a point where you were going to quit on the dream or give up on the dream?
Well, you know, I always hoped that I would get a chance to fly in space. My first space flight took place in 1998, and on that one it was a research mission. I was one of the designated spacewalkers, but we didn't get a chance to go outside. It was only if something broke that we would actually go outside to fix it. So on that mission I said, you know what, I want to do this again, and next time I want to be able to do 3 spacewalks. Unfortunately though, between my first and my second space flight, when I turned 50, I was diagnosed with cancer. And I lost all my medical certification as an astronaut, as a pilot, and had to go for surgery up in New York, and was in the hospital for 5 days, discharged from the hospital with drains in my abdomen and all these crazy things. But it turns out that I was able to recover from that and went back and did rehab with my trainer that we had at NASA, who was an incredible individual, got me back into my pre-flight condition about 6 weeks after surgery, got my medical certification back, and flew in space the second time as a cancer survivor.
That is a story. That's a history book story. I don't think anybody's done that before.
Well, we dig up ancient life, and a lot of people are confused about the difference between archaeology and paleontology.
I thought the two were the same.
They're not. No, archaeologists, they go and they look for human artifacts, you know, pyramids, mummies, the human trash, things like that. And so that's relatively recent stuff. It's hundreds or thousands of years. Paleontologists dig up really ancient fossils that are millions and millions of years, things that occurred long before there were humans. So we're not looking for artifacts, we're looking for fossil animals or plants or even sometimes microbes.
we can change people, we can change the world, and animals can be a part of it. Maybe we'll be a part of the world as well, because we are an animal. We just have a larger brain. And in order to save the cheetah, I have to figure out how to change the world and change human behavior. They're a predator, and people hate predators. We've been fighting predators for thousands of years because we're scared of them. We don't know anything about them, and we know that they could kill us. The cheetah is not a powerful and aggressive animal. You can chase it away. You can yell at it, like the sand bushman would follow behind the cheetah and take the kill away from the cheetah. And then the poor cheetah would have to go hunt again. But with that, it's not an aggressive animal, and that's why they've been probably revered and tamed down by people, but they don't breed well in captivity. And so they kept taking them from the wild and having them. But from that point, understanding how they live and understanding more about them from a biological, physiological standpoint, we still have to deal with how they're living with people and people are killing them.
The social aspect.
Yes. So saving the cheetah is really all about people.
And so when we look at the world and the way that I see it and the way that you see it, why do you think that there's not more education on the past? Because we seem to know a lot about what's going on today in the present, in the future. People look forward, hey, in 2020, this thing's gonna come out. In 2027, the new, but yet, in order for us to evolve, we must learn from our past. What have you learned?
Well, I think it's vitally important. The present is really nothing, right? The sentence I just spoke is already in your past.
That was old, yeah, it happened a while ago.
We don't have access to the future. The only way we will ever have to gain information that can guide us into the future is from the past. Winston Churchill said, the further back you look, the further ahead you can see. So 99% of creatures to ever live on Earth are already extinct. Almost all the humans to ever live are already dead. So all that information is in the past. And what the past really tells us, the abiding message of the fossil record, the rock record, is that it didn't have to be this way, this particular way. There are an infinite number of histories that we could have had. There's an infinite number of futures ahead of us. And we got really fortunate in that the one history that happened to result in our species and you and me is the one that occurred. But if you look back at the geological record, you could spend your life just describing all the little instances where if you tweak this way, you tweak this that way, then none of this ever comes to be.
What is the one message that you would give the world that if you can do one thing different, if you can look back on your own life before somebody enlightened you, what would you tell another you? What would you tell another me? What would you tell the people?
If you do want to go somewhere in your life, and if you want to take yourself somewhere, you just have to go for it, and you will run into the walls quite often. But there's always somewhere to turn. There's always someone to approach that will give you guidance and help. And just keep on doing it. I started with 2 empty hands. I was totally, that for me, I took a long way. But I believed in it. I had my heart in it, and I was focused, and I kept it narrow. And I just did it.
Your greatest adventure, as you look back on your career and you look forward to where you're going, what's the thing that has excited you the most? What is that one accomplishment? You would say, I'm really proud. Others thought it couldn't be done, or in this case, I pushed myself further than I ever knew I could go.
Yeah, for me, it was creating and flying the first mission to explore the farthest planet, Pluto, to do it rapidly in terms of development, and to do it reliably because we only had the money to send one spacecraft with no backup.
I think the type of explorer that I really respect, and the ones that I think were the toughest, were the guys that were setting sail across the ocean, not knowing what they were going to experience. The Vikings, the guys like Magellan, these guys that risked it all. They were risking not only their lives, the lives of their crew, all in the name of discovery. And they didn't have the technology that we had. They were guiding themselves by the stars. Unbelievable.
The courage, the risk, and the desire to know what's on the other side.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. The opposite of fear isn't love, it's curiosity. Think of it as a scale, balancing. You've got curiosity on one side that will draw you towards something, and fear, which will push you away from something. If you're curious about it, you're going to want to do it. Fear will push you away from it. And that applies to any situation where you get fearful. The more you learn, or the more you want to learn, the less fearful you'll be. So if you're afraid of something, I highly recommend study it, learn, read. You'll overcome your fears.
So we're all incredibly fortunate, and you know, my hope is that as people learn about their ancient past, that they feel gratitude, not pride, for our position, right? Because so much of it is just random.
It's random.
And that we feel small, actually, and precarious. Because if you feel that all and small for nature, I think it inspires you then to take better care of the planet in the future, because you can see from the geological record that, you know, the future is not owed to us, and we have to make it. And you know, we have options, and we could go the wrong way, we could go the right way, and you know, worlds don't have to have humans.
Sure.
The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Life is about 3.8 billion years. It's interesting because the early history of the Earth, the solar system is still condensing out of this big dust cloud. It's called the Age of Bombardment. So these planet sterilizing impacts are happening all the time. And finally, at about 3.8 billion years, the solar system is swept clear of this material. That's exactly when we see life appear. So life appeared on Earth as soon as it possibly could, which tells you that not only it's possible, but now it seems probable, right? Like as soon as that door was open, boom, life came through.
Supposed to.
But then most of the history of life on Earth is microbial. So we go from 2.8 billion years to about 2.5 billion years until we get multicellular life, real simple things like jellyfish and sponges. And then we go all the way to 500 million years ago until we start to get really complex life, things with hard part shells and eventually skeletons. If you put that 4.5 billion years on a single calendar year with the Earth beginning on January 1st, well, that's about Thanksgiving. That's the end of December before we get complex life. You think of dinosaurs as being old. The first dinosaur appears 235 million years ago. On that year, that's the second week of December. And dinosaurs dominate the continents for 165 million years and go extinct, except for birds, 66 million years ago. That's Christmas Eve. Our hominid ancestors like Lucy, Australopithecus, 6 million years ago, that's 3:30 in the afternoon on the last day of the year.
Isn't that incredible?
And then a few seconds before midnight, 300,000 years ago, we appear, and you know, we look around and we think it's all about us.
Quite a story. We always think the world revolves around us, and
just got here.
There are people who can do things, and there are young people who oftentimes older people go, oh, poof. But it's the younger generation that will make a difference. And you do need to have older inspiration, I think, and people who are willing to stand up and say, you can do things. And today we really need people who can inspire people to say, we need to change the world. And I was so proud to have such a great mentor. And I have tried to follow very strongly in his footsteps, because saving a species is about saving the world, changing the world. There's a spirituality to it. There's a love to it. There's a relationship about it. And it's trying to get other people to see, again, through your eyes, the fact that it's a species that has no voice. Being a voice for an animal is a big job. And yet, knowing species like this on Earth, we won't see it again. Even if we go to the moon and to Mars, we're not going to have an animal like the cheetah. So, save the cheetah, change the world.
We are losing wildlife in some of the least dense human habitations across the planet. So all over the world, in fact, there was a study done by the Living Planet, that's WWF report. It talks about decline of 60% of mammals, of 60% of the populations of all vertebrates have declined, right? And this is globally, so it's not about the density of people. So America, probably the population is far less, magnitude less than India. Their species have gone. About 200 years ago, several species got extinct because they were hunted down. The bison had been eliminated, the brown bear had gone, the black bear has gone from so many places, so many pumas, all these species were hunted to extinction. In India, we have had no extinctions since independence, and India attained independence in 1950.
1950 was your
Yeah,
independence.
1947, 1950.
July 4th.
Right? So, since then to now, no extinction of large mammals. As I talk to you, despite all the people and the density of those people around the forests, we have 65% of all wild tigers. We have 75% of all Asian elephants. We have 85% of all greater one-horned rhinos, and we have 100% of all Asiatic lions. These are large species which all across the world are considered as competitors of human beings. But in India, despite all the issues, they're still there. So I say that the animals never lie. Animals don't lie. So I can say that Indians are doing this, or Indians are great, they're protecting wildlife and all. But all that is story till you don't go and measure populations. Because for a common man, if I say it, they will believe it. But we go and actually estimate densities. And in fact, I'm expecting that this year, that every 4 years you have this tiger estimation program across the country. And it's about, the numbers are going to be out. And I feel that the population must have gone up by about 350 to 400 tigers.
So when you look far out, we ask about aliens. Do they really exist? What do you think? You've seen further than I've seen. You've seen pictures. You've seen places that none of us will ever, or at least right now, until we would go out there and look for it. What do you think about that?
I think we're going to find out, and we're building the tools to find out. Just in recent years, we've made two big breakthroughs. One is we now know that planets are common around all the stars in our galaxy, that there are probably 1 trillion planets in our galaxy.
There's 1 trillion planets in our galaxy.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
That's incredible.
It seems that every star has planets.
1 trillion.
And an equally big breakthrough is the discovery that oceans are common across our solar system. We used to think the Earth was the only place in the solar system with an ocean.
It was the only place.
But then we made one, and then two, and now many discoveries that point to the fact that oceans are very common, but they're not like the Earth's ocean. Even though they're still made of liquid water, they're beneath a shell of ice or ice and rock in worlds of the outer solar system. And so only Earth wears its ocean on the outside. All the others are in these wonderful cocoons that may be abodes for life. We're going to find out.
So is Earth 1 in a quadrillion? What would be the number if you had to look at outer space to find that how unique the Earth is?
I wish we knew that answer. We don't yet. One of the things that we found in discovering that planets are so common is that most types of planets are not like the Earth. They're sci-fi worlds like you'd expect to see on television. And we have not yet found an Earth. We found objects near the Earth's mass, but not also with the Earth's type environment. It's because our tools aren't good enough yet, and we have a bit of a needle in a haystack problem. But over the next 10 or 20 years, we should be able to get a good handle on what fraction of planets are Earth-like. And with literally something like 1 trillion planets in the galaxy, if 1 in 1,000 is like the Earth, there are 1 billion Earth-like planets just in the Milky Way.
That's incredible.
It really is.
It's clearly unusual, but I think what's really important about becoming an astronaut, about life in general, is resilience. and the belief that you can work through these problems. So often people talk about life in the pursuit of happiness. For me, it's more life in the pursuit of meaning, because I've had situations in my life that I cannot say were quite happy experiences. They were pretty tough experiences that I lost a lot and had to come back from that, regain it, and go on to be able to do what I wanted to do.
And how do you find the fuel? I say when you're depleted, I'm not a superhuman, but there are times where I find we can hyper-focus when we know where we want to go. Did you know, or was there somebody in your life to help remind you, hey, this isn't the end of your journey?
I knew, but I think it's really important for all of us to have mentors. And when I was growing up in Canada, dreaming of being an astronaut but becoming a scuba diver, Dr. Joe McGinnis was one of my heroes, a Canadian diving physician that worked with the US Navy on Tektite on these long-duration underwater missions. And I first met Joe in 2001 when I was working as an aquanaut on the Aquarius Undersea Research Habitat. And since then, we've been best of friends, and it's always great having somebody you can call, ask for advice, and get a lot of moral support from.
We, along with a few other NGOs, are helping them.
You're a guardian of the tigers.
Well, we are just guardian. I think, yeah, people associate us with tigers, but I think we are only protecting human beings. In a way, let us be realistic. If we don't protect the forest in the name of anything, you could protect the oceans in the name of a whale shark, or you need a symbol. And so tiger is just that symbol which allows us to get all the people together, and you protect the forest in the name of the tiger or an elephant or a snow leopard or anything.
It's the way in.
You protect the forest, you protect river systems, there is enough and more water for farmers, for fishers, and you protect the livelihoods of people, then you have a better future. So I think all that we do is only to make sure that the unborn generations of tigers, elephants and humans are safer on this planet.
So we voyaged to the edge of what's called the heliopause. And that means we felt the farthest distance that the energy, gravitational attraction of our sun, our little ordinary but beautiful star, if we didn't have the sun, we wouldn't be here. So we live off its energy as living things, makes the Earth special. But there are 10 to the 26 suns that we can inventory now. That's a big number. So our sun is where we live, and it controls our space weather, our space environment, very important. But you asked, how far have we reached? We've actually reached to the echoes of the Big Bang through the eyes and ears of things we can't see. Missions like COBE and WMAP, now Planck, are listening to those noisy echoes of what happened at the gestation of the universe we know. We're all part of something bigger. Our place in space is something we can define as explorers, as people, as whatever we are. And that's what's so special. We all find that niche. And you do it through your show, others do it by exploring the cosmos, climbing mountains, saving cheetahs, wondering about the microbial universe. My God, I just felt it, it's in my gut. But we all have our own passion, our own way. I think it's driven by the fact that all of us, whether we like it or not, are curiosity-driven explorers. We just don't always know that.
I would say the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life is fly in space. I mean, what can really top that? Going outside and standing on the end of the Canadarm, this robotic arm we use to build the space station, looking at a 4.5 billion-year-old planet upon which the entire history of the human species has taken place, realizing there are no boundaries between countries, that we're all in this together. Despite what we may think when we're living on Earth, we're in fact all in this together, and we recognize that the human species is a spacefaring species that will go farther into space and stay longer.
A little bit of faith, yeah, little bit of faith. is what it takes, yeah. A little bit of faith, yeah. You got faith, yeah. I need that faith. A little bit of faith, yeah. That's what it takes. As the earth keep on turning, I feel like I'm standing same place I was standing last week. Though the time keeps shifting, speed keep increasing. On the moon ain't got no shoes on my feet. You got me, I got you too. I know flowers need the water, I need you. A little bit of faith, yeah. A little bit of faith is what it takes, yeah. A little bit of faith, yeah. You got faith, yeah. I need that faith. A little bit of faith, yeah. That's what it takes. Mariana Trench, you're so deep. Through your ocean, I can see. It ain't no sandstorm gonna stop my stride. You the reason that I'm feeling alive. A little bit of faith, yeah. A little bit of faith is what it takes, yeah. A little bit of faith, yeah. You got faith, yeah. I need that faith. A little bit of faith, yeah. That's what it takes. A little bit of faith, yeah. A little bit of faith is what it takes, yeah. A little bit of faith, yeah. You got faith, yeah. I need that faith.